Hi everyone, it's Erin from the Provincial Farmhouse. Today I'm going to be creating a Christmas cloche decoration. For my project today, I'm going to be using a wood blank that I cut myself on my laser, and I'm priming it with Paint Couture's 2-in-1 primer in white. I'm going to be applying the primer using a sponge so that I don't get brush strokes or a build-up of lots of that product. I started by dabbing and stippling it, but I actually then decided that I would run the sponge over the surface, just sort of in lines, just sort of spreading that product, and I found I got a much smoother finish doing it this way. I'm going to be doing 2 coats of primer with about an hour in between, and I'm going to be painting both sides of each of the blanks because if you don't, you tend to get warping of the MDF, so definitely do both sides. When that was dry, I took out Paint Couture's Mystic Grey and Pacific Pearl chalk paint. I'm going to take a small amount of that Mystic Grey out and add it to my cloche surface. And then I'm also going to add some of that Pacific Pearl and start to mix them. I want to create a sort of wintry night's sky. So I'm just combining those 2 chalk paints until I'm happy with how that looks. As you can see, I'm sort of spreading that paint, then I'm grabbing some more of that Pacific Pearl white to lighten it up in some areas, and I will go back with smoothing strokes so that my brush strokes aren't as visible. Next, I'm going to take out some more of that Pacific Pearl and put it in a plastic container, and then I'm going to water it down with my water mister. I'm then going to dip my brush into that Pacific Pearl, and then I'm going to tap my brush over the top of the cloche so that I get little white speckles. When that was dry, I took out IOD's Ephemeral type stamp. I am going to be using a small selection of some of the cursive writing from that stamp. I'm going to be adding it to the plastic sheet that comes with it. You can use a thin mount if you want. I'm then going to be using IOD's white ink over the top of that. And then I'm going to start pressing down that stamp on top of my cloche background. Now I just want this to sort of fade into the background. I'm not going to add any more ink. I'm just creating an interesting background to use. I then took out IOD's new Vintage Snowflakes stamp. I'm going to be taking one of the smaller snowflake designs and I'm going to be using some of that white IOD permanent ink. And then I'm going to start randomly pressing that down. And I'm not going to add any more ink, so it is going to get progressively more faded. I then took out one of the other smaller snowflake designs and I'm going to repeat the same process, and I'm always mindful of where the border of that cloche is sitting, keeping that in mind while I'm applying the snowflakes. To make sure I don't get any smearing while I'm working on this surface, I'm using my hairdryer to heat set that ink, just running it over the top of it for about 2 minutes. Next, I'm going to be using these cookie cutter type molds that I picked up at a dollar store here in Australia. These were just in their baking section. There's a little attachment that goes on the back so that you can make those indentations. I'm going to be using these today with clay. I'm going to first add my air dry clay just to a plastic sheet, and then I'm going to start pressing it out. I'm not going to use a rolling pin because I do want these to still be pretty thick and not looking too perfect. And then I'm going to take one of the cookie cutters and I'm going to press it down and also press the top a little bit down so that I can get that detail indentation. Then I'm going to pull the clay around from the outside. So I'm going to just cast one of this particular style, but then I'm going to repeat the same process using this other sort of more Amsterdam style house, pressing that into the clay, and I'm going to be doing 2 of those. Now, in this occasion, I did not get the perfect impression that I wanted, so I just placed it over the top of again and repeated that process until I was happy with it. So definitely keep those cookie cutter molds in mind when you're working with clay. I then took out IOD's Blitz Mould. This is from, I think, 2 releases ago, and I'm going to be dusting the smaller snowflake there with cornstarch, then working my DAS air dry clay into it. I'm then going to flex the mold and carefully pull that snowflake out. These are quite delicate, so definitely use that cornstarch to make getting them out a little bit easier. I'm going to cast one of the other smaller snowflake designs. and gently pull that one out as well. And then I'm going to dust one of the larger snowflake designs in the top left there, and I'm going to be working my air dry clay in. Now I don't need this to be a full and perfect casting because I am going to be trimming this to fit so that it looks like part of the snowflake is sort of going off the side of my cloche. So I'm going to flex it, flip it over and pull it back. As I said, I didn't get a perfect mold there, but that's okay. And then I'm going to use a palette knife to cut that excess clay away so that the snowflake's sort of just peeking out from the top left hand corner. I then took out this Garland mold that you can find on Amazon. I've already dusted it with cornstarch and now I'm working my air dry clay into that. I'm then going to flex that mold and then pull that Garland out. I am going to be using this one underneath the houses. So here you'll see that I am having a look at how to position the houses, work out how much I need. And I'm going to just position those houses behind the garland a little bit there. And then I decided I would do a couple of partial castings so that I could continue that greenery on the right and left hand sides, but have that sort of sitting a bit further to the back. I then cast the same mold again, and this time I'm going to turn it around the other way, and that's going to sit up the top of the cloche. I then took out this bow mold that you can also get on Amazon, and I'm going to be working my clay into the larger of the two bow designs there, pushing out that excess clay. Then I will flex that mold, and I'm going to be flipping this over to help that clay release because it is quite a delicate casting to work with. I'm going to be layering that bow on the garland over the top. I then took out this other mold that you can get on Amazon, and I'm going to be dusting the scroll designs there with cornstarch, and then I'm going to be working my clay into one of those. I decided I wanted to add some detail to the bottom part of the cloche, so I thought that these would be perfect to go down the bottom where the feet are. So I'm going to cast the other mirror image of this mold to go on the right hand side, and then I'm going to cast one of the more intricate sort of scroll designs up the top there. I'm going to add some clay to that, and then that one is going to be going down the bottom in the center. So definitely keep that in mind when you get blanks and things like that. You can add those nice ornate details which definitely give it a bit more of a French look to them. I set my castings off to the side and decided that I would come in and add 2 coats of Paint Couture's Extreme Guard in Satin just to seal that background in. I have it looking exactly the way that I want. I don't want to risk wrecking that. I then took out Paint Couture's Pitch Black, and I'm going to be working with the cloche overlay. That's the top piece, and I'm going to be adding 1 coat of that black chalk paint over the entire cloche. I'm going to be working with Bronze Luxe Metallic a little bit later, and I want it to have more of a sort of antiqued, weathered look. Adding black underneath the metallics can definitely help achieve that look. So I'm definitely going to be achieving the look that I want by having this black down. And it does also save on coats of metallic as well. So when that was dry, I went in and started applying the bronze, and you'll see that I do end up stopping short of the bottom section. I decided that rather than doing extra coats over the sections where the molds are going to go, that I would move on to gluing those molds down just to save sort of doubling up on coats. So once I had the bronze all the way down to the bottom, I stopped and then took out my Sealy's Quickset wood glue, and I'm going to glue down the cloche base molds in position before I go on any further with my painting. As I said in the beginning, this is a craft blank that I designed and cut myself, and I designed it to look like a sort of vintage old world cloche. So it's definitely not perfect. The top isn't perfectly symmetrical, but I wanted it to look like an old finial, and I'm definitely loving working with this because I think that it could definitely be used year round. So if you're in Australia, make sure you check out my website. I have this craft blank available there. I let my castings dry for a few hours, and then I came in with some more of that pitch black chalk paint to go over the top of my white clay. Remember, we want that black down underneath the bronze so that the bronze looks more antiqued and weathered and worn. So just one coat over the top of each of my white clay castings. When that pitch black was dry, I continued on with that bronze luxe metallic, adding it over the top of the sections down the bottom where we have the castings. And again, I really do love this look where you still see some of that black peeking through. It definitely achieves that old world look. So I only ended up doing one coat of the bronze over the top overlay section of that cloche. Once the bronze was completely dry, I took out my Gorilla Super Glue gel, and I'm going to be adding a generous amount to the back of the cloche top overlay section, and then I'm going to position that down. Because I'm going to be overlapping molds over the top of the outside, I needed to do this step next. I then started adding some more of my Celia's Quickset wood glue to the back of each of my castings, and I started gluing everything in place. Now I painted the cloche overlay, that outside part, the border part, I painted that separate and then glued it on just to make it easier for myself so that I didn't have to worry about any of that bronze going on top of that middle section. It was just something that made more sense to do in that order. So I've glued down the houses. I'm then going to be adding glue to the back of that garland, adding in those extra little pieces on the side, and definitely just thinking about all those different layers and what has to be glued down when. So I'm just gluing the snowflake up the top there, then overlaying the garland and then the bow and then the snowflakes. I then added some more of that bronze luxe metallic around the outside border so that the sides blended together a little bit more. If I inspire you to try any of the Paint Couture products used in today's video, I would really appreciate it if you would use my affiliate link. I will put it in the description and on the screen. I just get a little thank you from Paint Couture in return. Next, I took out Paint Couture's Light Brown Sugar Antiquing Glaze, and I'm going to be working on one house at a time, working that glaze into the impressions from the cookie cutter mold. And I'm doing this so that the molds have more definition. So once I've added that to the front part, I'm also going to go around the sides of those little houses, almost giving them a little bit of like a warm glow halo look. And then I'm going to come in with a wet wipe and start pulling some of that back. I'm just going to work one house at a time because this is unsealed clay, so I haven't painted this clay, which means the glaze is going to soak in a lot quicker. So I need to keep that in mind and just work one section at a time. Once I finished adding the glaze to the houses, I moved on to adding it to the garland underneath. Again, I'm mainly doing this so that there is more definition in the details of those molds. I'm also going to repeat the same process for the garland and the bow up the top. When the glaze was dry, I took out Oyster Pearl Luxe Metallic. I'm going to be going over the top of the houses first. I'm holding my brush at a little bit of an angle so that it doesn't go down into the details where we have that glaze. I still want that definition, but this Oyster Pearl is going to give us a beautiful light metallic look, and it's going to give it a bit of shine and definitely just sort of lighten everything up. So I'm going to apply 2 coats to the houses, and then I took out Paint Couture's Vintage Moss mineral paint. This is very similar to Autumn Sage chalk paint, and I'm going to be adding that over the top of the leaves on that garland that are underneath. I haven't really mixed the paint very well because I wanted it to have a little bit more of a watery consistency, because once I'm happy with the coverage of the leaves, I am going to use a wet wipe to wipe back some of it. So it didn't make sense to go in and have it all filled in and opaque. So I'm going to repeat the same process for the garland up the top next as well, but I am avoiding the little pine cones that are in that design. When my paint was dry, I took out that Oyster Pearl Luxe Metallic again, and I'm going to repeat the same process, dragging my brush over the top of the high points so that we are getting that light definition over the top with the darker and the colored sections sort of in the low points. I'm going to repeat the same process for the top section of the garland as well. I then decided that I would add a bit more paint, a bit more of that Oyster Pearl paint to the bow up the top. I didn't love this look, but I knew I wanted to go a bit lighter, so I took out Paint Couture's Stardust Heavy Metal Metallic, and I'm going to use that over the top of the bow instead. And this definitely brought a bit more shine, which was what I was looking for. I didn't want to go with a gold because I already have the bronze on the outside of that cloche, so this Stardust was definitely a good option. I also added a couple of dabs of that Stardust on the berries that you can see on the garland below. When that was dry, I took out Paint Couture's Crust Medium. I've already tinted this with Pacific Pearl chalk paint, and I'm applying that to the roof of the little houses. This is meant to have a bit of a wintry theme to it, so I'm just applying that with my palette knife just to the roofs to start off with. I'm sort of scraping it off on the edges and then spreading it around and sort of dabbing at it so that it looks like little peaks, so it's not looking too flat. I'm just going to continue to add that crust medium across the top sections of the houses to begin with, and then I'm going to also add some of that crust medium to the garland below so that it looks like it's sort of piled up in front of the houses and on top of that garland. While that crust medium was still wet, I took out Paint Couture's Sheer Frost German Glass Glitter, and I'm going to sprinkle that over the top of the wet crust medium. It's going to make it look like it's sort of shimmering and glistening snow. Next, I took out Paint Couture's Weathered Wood Antiquing Glaze, and I'm going to be just applying it to the snowflakes. I wanted to give these some depth and dimension like we gave the houses, but it didn't feel right using the brown, so this grey was definitely a good option. I'm then using a wet wipe to wipe back the glaze from the top points, and I'm going to be repeating the same process on each of the snowflakes. When the glaze was dry, I took out the Oyster Pearl Luxe Metallic again, and I'm going to be running my brush over the top of the high points so that we bring back some of that lightness and some of that shine. When that was dry, I took out my Merry and Bright stamps from IOD. This is from quite a few releases ago, and I'm going to be laying down the words Good Tidings of Comfort and Joy down the center. I have them laid out exactly how I want them to be. I'm then going to take a small piece of plastic and I'm going to press that down so that the stamps will stick to the plastic in the formation that I want them to be in. I'm then going to flip that over, and I'm going to be using my permanent black ink by IOD on my stamps. I'm then going to position them over the top where I want them to go and then press down. And you'll notice I always have one hand holding it in place while the other moves around and applies pressure. And then once I'm happy with that, I will lift my stamps straight up. When that was dry, I took out my Stardust Heavy Metal Metallic again, and I'm going to be running that over the top of the snowflakes. I wanted to give them a little bit more shine, and I really love the combination of this with the Oyster Pearl. When that was dry, I took out the Oyster Pearl again. This time I'm flipping my brush around the other way, dipping it in the Oyster Pearl and dabbing it on my background so that I have some more of that sort of snow speckled effect, but it sort of stands out a little bit more because it is that Oyster Pearl Luxe Metallic, so it's giving us a little bit of depth. We've got the Pacific Pearl speckles in the background, and these are a little bit brighter and shinier in the foreground. Finally, I decided that I wanted to add some glitter to that top garland section. So here I'm going in with some of my Extreme Guard in Satin top coat. I'm going to be using this like a glue. So once I'm finished applying that, while it's still wet, I'm going to start sprinkling some of that Sheer Frost German glass glitter over the top. I'm envisioning this leaning against a shelf or maybe a stack of books, but you could add a picture frame leg to the back of it so that it stands up, or you could add a hook on the back for hanging. And here's a look at our finished Christmas cloche decoration. I love how this turned out. It was so much fun layering those different stamps and the molds. Let me know what you think of this in the comments. If you enjoyed today's video, I would really appreciate it if you would hit that like button, comment, and share it out. If you haven't already, I would love it if you would hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so that you don't miss out on any of our videos. You can find most of the products used today on our website, theprovincialfarmhouse.com.au. Thanks for watching.